Now that we've downloaded and installed Xcode 8, we're going to move straight on, create our first Xcode project. So I'm going to use Command Space to open up Spotlight and then type an X, and you can see it predicts. For me, I want Xcode Beta. If you're watching this video and Xcode 8 is not in beta anymore, then you'll just want the standard Xcode. You can see I've now got Xcode up here in the top left. So I'm going to click File, New, and Project. And this creates a whole new project which represents an app for iPhone and or iPad. And it will allow us to use the simulator as well to actually run our app on an iPhone right here within our machine. You can see we've got a number of application templates here, most of which we'll be looking at later on in the course. The main one that we're going to be using is a single view application, which is just a single screen onto which we can put our user interface elements. The rest are fairly self-explanatory. We've got a game using SpriteKit that we'll be using for our Flappy Bird game later on in the course. A master detail application. We'll be using this for our blog reader app. It's a great way of displaying a table of titles or email subjects or something like that, and then the main content on an iPad in the rest of the screen, or on an iPhone in a separate screen. So it's a really nice template if you want an app that's going to look good on both iPhone and iPad. And then you've got the quite similar page-based and tabbed application templates, and then the iOS 10 introduced sticker packs and iMessage applications, and you probably don't have the PhoneGap based application, so left over from my web developer course. So select single view application, make sure you've got iOS selected, and then click Next. And now we can put in a whole host of options for our project, most of which we're going to keep at the default. The product name, you can call this product absolutely anything you like, but I'm going to use Hello World, which is pretty much the standard name for your first app on any system. But you can call it anything you like. Team is a way of organizing different developers within the same account. We're going to be working with that, but not quite yet, so you can just ignore the team for now. Organization name, you can put in anything you like, so just the name of your app development company, if you have one or could imagine one, or just your own first name and surname, if you'd rather. The organization identifier is what's known as a bundle prefix. Essentially, it's a way of uniquely identifying your organization, and it comes in the form of a reverse web address. So you usually start with .com and then your organization name. So here I might have Appfish. You can have whatever you like there, but it's generally best to keep it lowercase and just including normal letters, no symbols. The bundle identifier will then be generated automatically for you. And if you were going to release this on the App Store, this bundle identifier would have to be absolutely unique to your particular app. Of course, we're going to be working in Swift 3 to be precise, and we can choose which devices we're going to target. Is it iPhone, iPad, or both? And just to keep things simple for now, we'll stick with iPhone, but we'll definitely be working with universal apps later on in the course as well. Finally, we've got core data, which we're going to be looking at later in the course, so leave that unchecked for now, and unit tests and UI tests, which we're not going to be working with, so you don't need to select either of those. All right, then click Next, and all that's left is to decide where to save your app. I'm just going to put mine right there on the desktop. So Create. That will then create the app for you, and it will build all the files that you'll need. And this is now the Xcode interface, not the friendliest of bits of software to get to grips with, but don't worry, I'll guide you through it and you'll be comfortable with Xcode in no time. So here we've got our main 3-pane layout. We've got a left pane, our center pane, and the right pane. And generally speaking, the left pane will show the list of files for our app, although we can choose other bits of information to appear here if we want to. The central pane will be where we're working with our code or our app layout, or in this case, our general settings for our app. We won't be editing anything here right now. We'll be coming back to this page quite regularly throughout the course. And the third pane over here is the context pane, which changes depending on what you've got selected. So as we look at different aspects of Xcode, you'll see that this pane updates with different content, and at the moment we've got just the general information about the app, name, format, etc. So that's our main work area. Just above that, you can see here we've got a lovely big play button, which will allow us to run our app on the simulator, which we'll do very shortly. We can also choose a scheme, which is particularly useful working with things like app extensions, but early on in the course, we won't need to be working with schemes, so we can just leave that for now. What you might want to play around with is which device the simulator works with. So you can choose any of the latest Apple devices. I'm going to go for the 6S because that works quite well with my screen size. But you can change that and play around with it as you like. Finally, over here, we've got our assistant editor here, the two circles, which allows us to have two windows at the front. That's particularly useful when you're working with the code and layout of your app at once, but we don't particularly need it for now. So I'm going to click the single pane button there to get rid of that. And the third button there is for version control, which we'll be using later on in the course, but not right now, so we don't need to worry about that. This last one, however, is very useful if you're working with different parts of Xcode. Quite often you want to hide bits of the editor to keep your screen as uncluttered as possible. So you can do that with the left and right pane buttons there, and you can also bring in a bottom pane, which we'll mostly use for things like error messages and comments from within our app. So feel free to play around with those and see how you can customize the Xcode interface as you like. Finally then, in this video, we're going to have a look at two of the main files that we're going to be working with. So we'll be editing all of these files at some point in the course, but right now we're going to focus on two of them. The first I'm going to look at is the main storyboard. So I'm just going to double click on that and we'll see it appear in the central pane there. And this is a really great way to lay out your app and its user interface. So in the next video, we're going to be dragging and dropping elements onto this screen here. And as I mentioned in the previous video, we can actually click View As, and then we can choose any device we like there as our preview. So it's really easy to try out different sizes and see how our layout is going to look on the different screen sizes. So let's go back to our iPhone 6S. We can also change the orientation to make sure our app will look good in both portrait and landscape modes. I mentioned at the beginning of the video the importance of the word view, and you'll notice it comes up here in terms of view controller. So in this context here, the view is the whole screen of our, in this case, iPhone. The view controller then controls the view and sets the layout of the various user interface elements within the view. It gets a little bit confusing because you can have views within views. So this view is the whole screen, but we could also have a table view within that which showed a table or a progress bar to show the user how far they are through a certain task. So essentially a view is anything that we make appear on the screen. We'll look at views in much more detail as we start adding things like images and labels to our user interface, which we'll do in the next video. The final thing I want to show you now then is viewcontroller.swift. And this is our Swift code which controls our app. So we're not going to be writing anything in here quite yet, but towards the end of this first section, we'll be editing this file to make our app interactive and essentially make it do something useful. So that's the Xcode interface and the two main files that we'll be working with. We've got the left pane with our file list, we've got our main editing window, and we've got our context sensitive pane, which you probably saw changing a few times as we clicked on different things within Xcode. Finally then, if you haven't already done so, let's see what happens when we click the play button to run our app on the iPhone 6S. Notice we haven't edited the app at all, so all our app is going to be is a blank screen. So not very exciting, but at least it'll show us that we've got something working. So we can click over to the simulator. You can see why I like the iPhone 6S there. Fits nicely in my screen. And As with any iPhone, it takes a little while to boot up, but when it's done, we should see our app running and our not particularly impressive blank screen app appear on the screen of the simulator. And there we go. You can see our first completely blank iPhone app is running on our mobile device here. That might be a little underwhelming, and we'll see how to add some content to our app in the next video. But for now, just notice that we're running a complete simulation of iOS 10 here in our device. And to see that in action, we can press Hardware and Home to simulate a home button click, and then you're back at the familiar iPhone screen, and you can mess around with all the apps on the iPhone, and you can also see the new widgets page in iOS 10. So there's your very own iPhone running on your computer. The last thing to notice is this output down here. This is known as the console, and you can see that Xcode 8 has given us a bunch of information about our app. This is nothing that we've coded, it's just the default information that you can use to debug and find out what your app is doing. We're going to learn how to put information ourselves down here very soon. For now though, you're hopefully reasonably comfortable with the Xcode interface, with our left pane, main editing window, and the right pane, and then the console down the bottom here. And we've also used the simulator to see how we can run iOS 10 on our computer and see our apps in action. All right, we're not content with a blank app for very long though, and we're going to see how to add our first user interface element in the next video, and that's going to be a label.